with Kate McKinnon. We're going to be talking about activating managers, a candid conversation on culture, leadership, and performance. And so we have an awesome kind of interview style, ad hoc conversation with Kate all on that. And I'll introduce us both in a second. But while we wait for people to join in, it's awesome to see 50 people here so far. Write in the comments, we're all here together in person. So let's connect. Put in a chat something you're looking to get out of this, and maybe where you are or your industry. There's other people in this room right now that can connect with you on things that you're interested in and find commonalities, find connections. Is what's so cool about being in these events. Look through the people that are here. So please share, what industry or where are you, something that you want to get out of this. I'm hoping to learn a little bit more again around managers and learning from what Kate has seen on how to activate managers. Something that we've seen in our work is that when you activate managers, it becomes a flywheel of activity. But the managers need to know what to do. They need to hear from the leaders what to do, and we'll talk about that with Kate. But it's great to see people calling in from Vancouver. We always have people from Vancouver. I love that. Our sister city in the north here in Seattle. I'll be in Vancouver actually on Friday or Saturday. I'll be up in Squamish for the weekend. I'm really excited about that. Chattanooga, I love Chattanooga, beautiful town, and a lot of great food, a lot of great nature and waterfalls. Great to see everyone here. Let's see, I think I saw Austin. I used to live in Austin. Love going there. I go there every 3 to 6 months. I'm in Austin. So if you ever want to connect, please connect with me. And we'll share how to do that in a second. San Francisco also. Love San Francisco. Used to live there as well. Mexico City, great. I've spent a lot of time there as well. I love Mexico City. Great food. Obviously, as being American, we're in Condesa usually. We're in Roma. But I do love the culture. And wow, Hawaii, so much fun. Okay, well, this is great to see now 66 people in the room. Thanks everybody for coming in. And think of something to ask later, because we're going to have a chance for you all to, at the end, to talk to Kate and ask questions as well, or to me. So please think about those things, and you can share them in the chat. We have a team of people listening in to be able to make sure that your questions are heard. So just a little bit about me. I'm Alex Grandy. I'm my background and the things I'm passionate about are psychology, motivation, web development, technology, innovation. And I founded a tool called Recognize, and it's an employee recognition and reward software that uses gamification and rewards in 150 countries to make your company more fun, better culture, drive the values of the organization. I talked to an HR director yesterday, and she couldn't list her company values. Why is that? Because they're just in a notebook somewhere. We need to make them living and breathing through gamification, through continuous reinforcement of what success looks like, and sharing that in the Microsoft ecosystem, sharing that in Slack, in Teams, and SharePoint. So connect with us. That's my email address. You can connect right to me. I do answer every email that comes in. And we're so lucky to have, without further ado, Kate McKinnon. Kate McKinnon is an HR executive and coach who helps organizations build people-first culture and develop leaders. Former head of HR at Playfly Sports. Now she partners with companies on coaching, leadership development, and people strategy. Supports former athletes, veterans, and early career professionals through career transitions. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I have to say, I'm very jealous of the individual that I saw pop up that is in Hawaii right now.
Yeah, we need to have maybe a team gathering in Honolulu.
Yes, agreed.
Right. Well, yeah. So I'm just going to turn off the sharing of the screen for now. We'll talk more about a couple of things at the end. But really, this is a conversation more than anything. That's what's so fun about this is, I wanted to kind of set the stage here with the questions that we have. We all know that managers make a big impact on the employee experience, but why do you think managers matter so much?
Yeah, I think the reason it comes down to the fact that they're sort of the translators, right? So they are talking to the executives, they're cascading executive ideas, thoughts, direction to the employees that they support, and vice versa. They're communicating upwards to really help executives understand what the mindset is, what the culture looks like, what the feel of the organization is. And so they just are this conduit that is they're just so critically important, and pouring into our managers and especially that middle management layer is really really critical in the workplace right now.
And then you mentioned that kind of communication up. I think people are often afraid to do that because oftentimes it could be seen as maybe you're giving feedback up or criticism upward. And so, how do I think that it's so important to have the right kind of conversation so that it doesn't come across that way and that you have that psychological safety as a manager to communicate up.
Yeah, it's really important. I mean, that's where trust comes into play. That's where actively engaging with your employees, with your managers comes into play. And that's where I think feedback up and down and doing something with it is really what starts to build that trust. So, people understanding that giving feedback is not necessarily coming with repercussions or it won't be taken a certain way. It's really actively listening and also assuming positive intent and assuming that people are trying to make things better by what it is that they're saying. And I think sort of taking that personal feel out of it a little bit and reflecting on why the feedback is being given is really that sort of shift that needs to happen.
Yeah, it's not about you or me. It's about the mission. It's about the goals of the company and the processes that we have.
Mhm.
Um, and so, why or what are some of the biggest challenges managers face today that maybe weren't here 10, 15 years ago?
Oh boy. Well, I like to kind of start with COVID. Um, you know, COVID time just changed the workplace so much and required that leaders of people are managing far more than they ever had before, even in terms of just the psyche of the people that are reporting to them on a day-to-day basis. But then you add in the technology, AI, social media, the political climate, like there's so many factors that influence how people feel at work. And the reality is that people bring their full selves to the workplace. And so that's always sort of this undercurrent that managers are having to deal with. I think the other thing, too, is employment laws have become increasingly more employee friendly. So there is also a carefulness in how you're managing situations in the workplace. So there are just so many push and pull factors that managers have to deal with on a day-to-day basis that weren't in existence 10 or 15 years ago. And so it's a tough time to be a leader of people. I actually have seen a lot of leaders of people previously now saying, you know what, I've done all of that, but now I would rather be an individual contributor because leading people right now is just so challenging.
And you mentioned kind of that being maybe I like to say walking on potato chips
Yes.
a little bit, and so you feel the managers are concerned about saying the wrong thing that can maybe lead to being on social media or something.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that there's just a carefulness in feedback giving and making sure that it's delivered the right way, making sure that, you're taking a lot of different factors into account. And I think that there's a fear of, yes, social media exposure or doing something incorrectly. We see it in the education system too, right? Like just being afraid to have those difficult conversations and also not being equipped to know how to have difficult conversations or provide feedback.
And you mentioned, I love that phrase, undercurrent. Everyone comes to work with whatever state they're in. I know at Disney, my friend was one of the Disney characters at Disneyland, and they had, yoga, snacks, food, rest, care, because they need those people to be on top of it. So, what are some things that managers can do, even if they don't have a budget, that can help have those difficult conversations, or just check in with people before they even talk to them? I know with Slack and Teams, now we can't even read someone as we walk up to them anymore.
Yeah. Well, everything is competing for everybody's attention, right? It's Slack, it's text, it's email, it's just constant input. And I think in order to build relationships with your team and with the people on your team, or even the people that you collaborate with in the workplace, having these intentional conversations where you are limiting some of those distractions. Obviously, companies having a framework in place makes it a lot easier to do that. But being intentional with the conversations that you're having, I think, this idea of doing more with less has just been a constant in the workforce for the last 5 to 10 years, especially the last 2 to 3. And so there's just this reactive state that takes over in that type of an environment where you're constantly almost like behind the eight ball. And so being able to be proactive about the care that you pour into your people and the conversations that you're having with your people, it becomes even more important because everything can just feel like a check-in for the sake of getting work done as opposed to a check-in for the sake of actually checking in and seeing how people are doing.
And I can definitely see that playing into the experience um, with that employee in that environment, that employee experience, as we say, and kind of broadening that actually when you look at organizations with strong cultures, what roles do managers play in creating that experience?
Wow. I mean, that's everything. I mean, companies that have strong cultures are companies that do what they say they're going to do. They engage in the behaviors that they say they value, and so that needs to come all the way down throughout the organization. So there should be some type of goals and performance metrics based on behavior, the way that they're going about doing their day-to-day role. It is culture is not what you say things are. Culture is what they are. And so there's just this idea that, I'm going to slap some things on the wall and that's what we're going to be doing. But the reality is that I like to say culture is only as good as the worst behavior an organization is willing to tolerate. And so making sure that you're holding people to account if they are not behaving in a way that is conducive to your culture.
Mm-hmm. That made me, yeah, I love that. Always when coming back when we were talking about earlier about feedback, it's not about you, me, or whatever. It's about, hey, here's our goals, here's our mission, here's our values, and we want to be aligned on those things, right?
Yeah.
And it can be hard for people to admit when they're not within that. That's why you stay on the thought positive rather than accusatory.
Yes.
Um, Now, going on to this, I really think that I made me think of a story I read in a book about company values that said a company had a value of, no jerks work here
Mm.
kind of value. But then Tim, he's a real jerk, right? But then why is that? Well, but Tim's a high performer. And okay, well, then that's fine. But then maybe remove the thing that says no jerks work here because you obviously tolerate it. So
That's
that's
right.
the real culture.
That's exactly right. And you see that a lot in sales environments where actual production is, or high pressure environments where the production is making the company a lot of money or they're overachieving consistently. And, I've seen a lot of, organizations that really struggle with this idea that, we have this top performer, but they're kind of a jerk, but, they're the top performer. So everybody knows just to leave them alone. Well, that
Mhm.
says something about the culture. It says that your output is more important than your behavior, and that creates a really slippery slope. Just like organizations also tend to tolerate the person that contributes greatly to the company culture that may be a little bit behind on performance. And so there's this sort of counterbalance there, and making sure that you're just holding everybody to a very similar standard as it relates to performance and also culture, contribution.
Yeah, I mean that person in a vacuum might be a high performer, but if people are having to interact with that person, what is the uh, the opposite side of that, where people are being demotivated because they're and so I think that's really interesting. Also, you also mentioned that a company is only as good as its worst behavior. That reminds me of a study that found that you're only as strong as your weakest link. That
Mhm.
if you have a group of people working on a problem and one person's a naysayer, they're negative, everyone goes to that person's level. Unless there's one person that says, Kate, what do you think about this? Jess, what do you think about this? And actually pull people in. But you got to be very careful with those people who are those, they're those energy vampires, as we call them.
Yes. Yes, the energy suck. Yeah, and that happens. That's the reality, and I think that's why setting your standards, your boundaries, your expected and tolerated behaviors is so critically important because then you can look at a top performer and say, yes, you're performing at this significant level, but the other half of your performance is also how you make people feel around you or how you exemplify the behaviors that we think are important at this organization.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I totally agree. I have a lot of thoughts on that with people who have been high performers, but then they make people cry. So, it just doesn't work.
Right.
Um, kind of moving on a little bit, on the same topic of trust and communication, what are some of the fastest ways managers unintentionally lose trust with their teams?
I think there are a couple of things, but the most important is not doing what they say they're going to do. When managers don't follow through, that's what becomes problematic. And I also think that it's perfectly acceptable to be honest with your team. If you can't accomplish something or you're having a hard day, I think having that leadership vulnerability actually does build a significant amount of trust with your team as well. So I've also seen, managers losing trust because they sort of stay in this, which is easy, by the way, when you first start leading people. It's easy to say, like, oh, I need to keep this, face. I need to make sure that I'm not engaging, not telling people how I really feel, not being honest. And I think that ends up losing trust. So, having a appropriate amount of leadership vulnerability, letting people know, like, hey, like, yeah, this initiative is going to be really tough, but we can do it together. And this is how we're going to do it. What are your thoughts? Right. As opposed to just, well, you know what? It is what it is. And this is what we're doing. Just it kind of sharing like how you feel about things, I think really goes a long way to build trust. When you stop doing that, people start to say, well, we can't talk to them, we can't share how we're feeling about things, we can't share if something is unachievable, and then that creates a bigger separation with the leader and the team.
Creating again that psychological safety so we can have real conversations is so critical. And I think also we gotta be very careful about where and when. It's so easy to just dump your thoughts into Teams or Slack. I'm guilty of this still today. I'm better at it than I used to, but it's always like, hey, I'd love to talk about X or have a list of things you talk about. You can have a checklist in Slack, in Teams that you can actually go through. So you have the right moments to have that. I also think it's so important to have one-on-ones where you can actually have these kinds of conversations rather than just talking about the weather.
Yeah, it's true. And talking about things with substance and not just having every conversation center around performance, or what somebody is
Mm-hmm.
doing wrong. There's a
Yeah.
book that
Yeah.
I read very early and when I was studying for my master's in leadership development called How Full is Your Bucket?
Yeah.
And they have a children's version. It's a very simple, easy read. It's great for new managers, but it talks about these positive deposits that you're constantly making with your team, which then allow for you to have candid feedback sessions when there is a challenge or a struggle because you've built that trust equity with your employee. Oh, what was the book
Mm-hmm.
called? How Full is Your Bucket?
Um, yeah, great book. And I think that's why it's so important to, in kind of to plug what we do at Recognize, which is positive reinforcement. You're positive, you're reinforcing the good behavior. And also a lot of times that kind of, that kind of those, what you're doing wrong conversations can be flipped into actually nothing to do with doing anything wrong. It's about doing something maybe a little bit different,
Mhm.
all right, or more aligned, but it doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. And if you start off with you're doing something wrong, you lost some. No one's listening anymore.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and I think your point about I think the anxiety of unknowing, that's the problem that we face. You started off with that by saying that managers, when they don't, when people don't know when their managers are going to do something, or maybe they've overpromised, underdelivered. And I think that's all true of your employees. If the employee says, yeah, I'll get it done," and they don't say when, or maybe they say when, but then they don't. That's hurting that trust. You want to build that bucket of trust um, in all directions inside the organization. Um,
Yeah, it's so important. I
Yeah.
actually read a study somewhere that said that it is actually worse to have an unpredictable manager than it is to have a manager that's consistently good or consistently bad. So that inability to predict behavior also creates a loss of trust that can form pretty quickly.
Wait, and that's why you don't you have cognitive dissonance, and it's a lot of mental capacity to be in that constant state of cognitive dissonance, and actually they found that frenemies are the worst type of friends, right? The ones that sometimes are there for you, but then they also stab you in the back at the party. That one, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So those are the friends that really add a lot of anxiety to our lives that we just gotta get rid of. Gotta stick with the good people, and I think that's something that we learn over time as we get older as well.
Yes, agreed.
Um, and I think that unpredictability is, yeah, so critical. Also, there's that book, Essentialism, the Pursuit of Less. You know,
Mm.
don't overpromise. You know, like you said, you do something, you say you're going to do something you don't. Well, maybe you shouldn't have said that you're going to do it
Yes.
because you couldn't do it.
Yes. Under promise, over deliver is always a good tactic.
But at the same time, I think if something's coming and people are now whispering about it, there's rumors, it's nice to be able to talk about what you're trying to accomplish. Maybe I'm trying to accomplish this, and you just being more real with people.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, yeah, moving on a little bit to some other topics around accountability and performance. I
Before
looked
we
at,
jump there, Alex, we do have a question in chat. Sorry to interrupt
oh,
from
thanks, please do.
Julie. Before we move on, do you have
Yeah.
any best practices, advice for situations where you know leaders' behavior is negatively impacting the business from a performance and culture perspective? However, senior leaders aren't prioritizing as these individuals are their friends and creating a boys' club experience.
Ooh, that's a good one. I think again, from my perspective, it depends on the environment. I mean, coming from, heavily, most executive teams are leaning a little bit more towards males at the very top of an organization. And so there is that sort of feeling of being unheard or not being able to bring your perspective to the table, to the forefront. I think that it's helping people understand the problem of not addressing or solving something. What is it causing? What are the challenges? Having employee engagement surveys and feeling like you can be honest in those types of surveys, checkpoints, making sure that you have managers that are skilled at being able to bring these topics up to executives when they hear that there's a problem. I think approaching it in a non-threatening way, by saying, my goal is I have the best intent for this company. I want this company, this team, this division to be successful. And I'm seeing that here are some wonderful things that are happening, but here are some areas of challenge or struggle that I think maybe we could pay some more attention to. So it depends on the situation, the type of leadership, the relationship you have with your leaders. I think this is also where HR can play a really nice role in helping communicate some of those challenges directly. Alex, I don't know what you have to add to that.
Yeah, so a lot about it 'cause I've worked in these environments. I think it's pretty common, actually, especially in companies that have been around for a while. Some people may have been elevated over a long period of time. Maybe they were a smaller company, now they're a bigger company, and the people who were there in the beginning are still there, and they're there just because of some kind of nepotism, or connection, right? And I've had bosses that were completely incompetent in my life who, one in particular, most of my bosses have been great, but one person in particular, they were really there because they've just been there forever. And they've just been elevated, kind of that people, they just keep getting promoted rather than kicked out. I think there's like a Seinfeld episode like that. But essentially, you need to illuminate the situation as much as you can. I think maybe even at the board level, maybe there's ways to do that that aren't risking your potential, employment. Employee surveys where maybe some of the questions are, it's anonymous and private, the answers, and you do an employee survey that then, delivered to senior leaders that can illuminate the problem. I know that you're saying that they are friends. breaking up that kind of friendship bond or that club is incredibly challenging. And sometimes maybe it's just not the right bus. I left organizations because of that kind of groupthink mentality that I was just seeing the company go in the wrong direction. And then it did. I left, and they didn't go off on a rocket ship like they were saying they were. So I think your intuition may be important to maybe just look at what other opportunities are out there. And that's the problem, is there's companies that they're just toxic, and it's too, you can't do anything about it when the kernel, the core of the company is what's the problem.
Great ad.
Yeah. Was there any other questions or anything that you want to ask, Jess?
Yes, one more. Christina is asking, what are leading indicators / metrics to identify culture risks?
Do you want to start with this one, Alex?
Well, yeah, I mean, just because of what we do at Recognize, employee recognition is a leading indicator. So any kind of programs like that, where you're capturing information continuously, so that could be also another leading indicator metric is your Slack data or your Teams data. How many people are emojiing people's responses, right? How much are people connected to each other in Teams? Is there a change? Is there a shift or a delta, right, from where you were to now in your Teams or your Slack? Is there less collaboration? Now, less commenting and less kind of chit chat, could be actually mean that they're being more productive, right? So you kind of have to differentiate between the fluff and the content. But again, using an LLM or analyzing it, you can do that now. The nice thing with something like Recognize is that literally is how many times someone's being noticed for going above and beyond on a continuous basis. And so, and also how much cross-team collaboration is happening. So if a recognition is happening in the IT department that's being sent to the communications team, that means there's cross-team collaboration that's happening there. And that decreases over time. And you know what your base rate is, it's healthy based off your organization. And then if there's a change, immediately you can know as a leading indicator rather than waiting for that survey. Instead, then by using that data, you can change a little bit of the questions in the survey to get even better answers than before. That's right. I think we have another webinar on that we have a new campus that you can go and watch old videos and we go over things like that. But yeah, Kate, anything you want to add?
I truthfully have nothing to add. I think that was great. I agree with everything you just said.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. So going back to accountability and performance listeners. Oh, I see Josh has a question too. Yeah, let's keep it going. I'll read Josh's question. I see here. What are your thoughts on anonymous versus identified surveys when trying to create a culture of radical candor? So if your value is radical candor, then go for it. Yeah, have surveys be identifiable. Let people, that's the culture you're creating. Let people build that kind of, again, if they can say what they want in that survey, and then they're not reprimanded for doing that, then you'll build trust. You'll show people the next time that they can be even more honest.
Yeah, that's I haven't had a lot of employee engagement surveys where organizations are wanting that identifying nature of the survey, just specifically because even if they say that they have radical candor, they don't necessarily practice it. And so a lot are starting with the anonymous survey, and then really actioning on it. I get the question a lot, like, how anonymous is this survey? And I say, well, if it's an anonymous survey, I can promise you that one thing that like HR teams don't have a single second of the day to focus on is like who said what. It truly is anonymous, and we do not dive deeper into that data. But I think also understanding who has access to the full survey data and the results and what type of platform you're utilizing is also critically important. But if you truly have a culture of radical candor and people feel like they can be honest and that it's taken seriously and that it's taken with the idea that positive intent is always assumed, I think that is a wonderful thing. Rare, but wonderful.
Good question. Well, we'd love to hear back. Josh, please let us know how that goes. Come back to a future webinar or connect. I'd love to hear your story. Actually, let's move on a little bit. I mentioned recognition. I'd love to, given the time we have, love to move it along a bit to the some of the questions around recognition and engagement. So Kate, how does recognition influence engagement and performance to you?
I mean, it's everything. I work with everyone from recent graduates to C-suite executives, and the one thing that they all have in common is that it feels good to be recognized for the work that they're doing. Even C-suite individuals that I work with, they will say, I don't even know if I'm on the right track. Nobody gives me any guidance. They just let me go along and continue to do my thing. And every once in a while, it would be nice to hear you're doing a great job. And for some reason, the higher you go in an organization, the more people think you don't need to hear that you're doing a good job. Or the assumption is that, well, they're at this level, they should know that they're doing a good job. And that is not true. There is not a single person that doesn't benefit or doesn't appreciate being thanked for the work that they're doing. Every single person wants it. And so the more I say, like, sprinkle it like glitter, like give people recognition for the things that they're doing, thank people for what they're doing, you will get better performance. You will get higher engagement. And, to Alex's point, cross functionally is just as important. So if you're working hand in hand with people that are not in your department, thank them for helping you do something. Give them that positive reinforcement because you want to reinforce the behavior you want to continue to see. It works better. It just does. It works better with kids. It works better with individuals. It works better with employees. So I think it's incredibly important. Maybe
Yeah,
the
and
most important thing.
we underestimate what it means to somebody else,
Mhm.
right? But I think it can be if done, it can, people may not know what to say. It can come off as corny, or it can come off as transactional. So, what do you think that managers need to look for to really separate that meaningful recognition to make it feel not so forced or transactional?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very similar to goal setting, right? Like you want to have some type of specific thing that you're recognizing. You want it to be timely, you want it to be measurable. I mean, literally, you can follow a SMART goal and use that for recognition if you're not sure what kind of template to utilize. But letting people know, hey, listen, thank you so much for your help in XYZ project. It really allowed me to focus more on the strategy. I appreciate your help tremendously. Something like that. Also, understanding, I think for leaders, there's this idea that everybody wants to be recognized publicly, and that is not always the case. So, also understanding your audience and how they like to be recognized. Do they like to be recognized publicly? Would they prefer just a quick thank you? Is a text good? So, understanding that from your employees, even as part of your questions when you interview people. How do you like to be recognized? How do you like to be led? How do you like feedback? That all sort of culminates in delivering it in a way that's going to resonate with the person that you're giving it to.
Yeah, and beyond just like kudos, attaboys, right? They're just the act itself. How can companies or how can you help leaders better understand the meaning of it? Like maybe tying in, for instance, values, or how do you help have recognition improve accountability and performance rather than just simply being an engagement tool?
Yeah, so I think there are a lot of different ways that you can do that. I think assigning value to recognition also continues to indicate the importance of it. So having performance metrics tied on how many people are you recognizing every month, having awards that people can win or can purchase. I've implemented a lot of different platforms over my career that really help to assign a value to a level of recognition that you're getting or size of project that you're working on or cross collaboration, teamwork. So I think also starting with the values that you sustain as an organization and saying these are the things that we want to recognize, these are the things that we want to reward. It becomes just a part of your total rewards package that you're giving your employees in addition to comp and benefits and all of those things. Having a good recognition strategy and giving it thought and being strategic with that plan is a great way to tie that into the total rewards for the employee.
Very cool. Actually, yeah, we have a poll now. I'd love to hear from the group. What kind of recognition programs you currently have? Let's put that poll up. You can select multiple ones, so usually that's the case. I do know that the World at Work survey every year they found pretty consistent. 75% of companies have a service anniversary program. So I'm expecting something similar here, less so on peer-to-peer recognition. Thanks to technology, it's never been easier to incorporate peer-to-peer recognition. But yeah, we're curious what the group says here. What programs do you incorporate in your company? And again, this ties in nicely to managers because we found with our tool, recognize if managers are engaged, the whole company is engaged. And the way to get managers engaged is by having the leaders tell them that's important, reinforce it themselves. I think that's so important about, you said, Kate, on as you get up in the organization, it's almost like you have less safety in being able to say, hey, great job. Maybe because of competition, or maybe you feel like, yes, they don't need to hear it. Yeah, that's so interesting. But we just gotta force ourselves, and it becomes easier. Yeah, I'm excited to see the result of the poll. Jessica, here we go. Great.
Oh, wow.
Awesome. So yeah, it seems like a lot of people have, a lot of people here have multiple programs. Because yeah, about half of you have a program, and it seems like I can't see the results completely here, but I'm assuming that if you have a program, you have multiple programs. But that was really cool. Look at that service anniversary. I was expecting a lot more, as I said, the service anniversary. I was expecting it more like 75%, but that is very interesting. And to the 6 of you that do nothing, that's great. As I always tell people, that means there's so much you can do, and it's really easy to get started. But yeah, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about something that is really interesting to me, which is multi-generational teams. Right now we have Gen Z, we have with the next one, millennials.
Yep.
Okay, millennials, and then we have Gen X, and then there's baby boomers before. Yeah.
Yes. Baby boomers and then silent.
And so it's just a very interesting time. And I've talked to companies that, they'll say, we've been around for 20 years. We have people in their 60s, but now half of our company suddenly has been here for 9 months and they're all 22 years old. Like, what do we do here? So yeah, just a handful of questions around this topic. So I know you coach leaders across multiple generations. What are some of the biggest misunderstandings you see between managers and the younger employees?
Oh my gosh. I feel like I could talk about this just really forever, but I'll try to keep it as short as possible. But we've never had more generations in the workplace ever. And we've also never had more generations that are kind of, I would say, resistant to understanding where the other one is coming from. And the best organizations are going to be the ones that are able to figure this out, because the reality is that younger generations are going to continue to come. Older generations are going to continue to leave the workforce, and not being able to have that knowledge transfer, not being able to understand how to utilize new tools, new programs, new platforms, and communicate with the generations that your product or service serves is going to be detrimental to the organization in the future if you can't figure this out. And so I think some of the biggest misconceptions are that younger generations are entitled, they don't want to work, they care more about their life outside of work, they don't have any motivation, they don't accept authority. And then on the flip side, people old like me and older are rigid, and we just want to do things our way, and we don't want any input, and we don't care about upcoming generations. And I think, coming from a place of just assuming positive intent and assuming that communication styles are different, not one is not better than the other, they're just different. Really looking and seeking to understand is the first step in really being able to close that gap.
And I think also just coming back to something that I think is really important, which is diversity.
Yes.
And inclusion, right? So we need to be thinking about those things, because it's not just people who maybe not look like us, but it's actually people who are just younger or older. And I know there's a lot of there can be a lot of ageism and a lot of just that kind of basic human, us versus them kind of mentality. So what are some things you can that you see that are able to help kind of bridge that gap?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think breaking down that us versus them component is really important. It to me, it feels very lazy when people just label in that way. It just shows a lack of wanting to understand or desire to understand. And I also think that from a diversity perspective, I think diversity of thought is also one of the most incredible pieces of any type of DEI plan, platform, program,
Mhm.
focus. Because when you have people of different ages, when you have people of different upbringings, when you have people of different beliefs, you're bringing together creativity in your
Yeah.
organization. And creativity impacts the organization positively in every sense of the word. And so, yes, I think having a large number of generations in the workplace can be really challenging, but it also allows you to tap into something pretty incredible if you're able and willing to do it. And so some things that I've seen move the needle are mentoring programs and also reverse mentoring programs where you have people that are a
Mhm.
little bit older being mentored by people that are coming upcoming in the workplace. And continuous feedback is another thing that I think is really important. Understanding areas where people are maybe being misunderstood, gaps in the workplace, having things like IRG programs, ERG programs, where they're employee led programs that bring people of all different backgrounds together to talk about a common ground. So those are just a couple of little things that I've seen that work really well in organizations when they're trying to bridge that gap.
I'll be honest, employee resource group, ERGs, it was a new topic for me. Um, you know, um, you know, I'm not, although I work in HR tech, I do not have an HR background. So I am learning through osmosis. And I was at the Great Place to Work conference in April in Vegas, and a great conference. I highly recommend people going, even if you aren't a Great Place to Work customer. But yeah, I went to a session on ERGs. It's so cool, the
Mhm.
concept. It just creates more richness in the organization, creates more friendship, creates more connection. I think we all know that when kids of different backgrounds come together and play,
Mhm.
suddenly everything breaks down. And I was going to mention mentoring. You beat me to it. Having different people, different backgrounds, working together, learning from each other. And yes, I love that. That was so good. All those suggestions were excellent. And also, yeah. And then what's the bottom line? Well, creativity leads to ROI. So let's increase creativity. Um, so another question is, how can managers adapt their leadership style without lowering their standards
Mm.
or expectations?
It's an interesting question, and I think having standards, you should have standards, right? They're like everybody's at work to do a job, right? There's a performance aspect to your job. And so I think managers holding people to performance expectations is just part of the work, right? But I think that there are different ways to get performance out of your team that allow you to elevate your expectations while also being empathetic and kind and caring about the whole person. And I don't think it's one or the other. I think you can have both. And so a lot of times I'll work with managers who have a challenging leadership style to help them understand that really softening a bit and trying to understand what motivates your team, what drives your team, that will help you get better performance. If you're just laser focused on the number, the number, the number, the number, you might get the number, but you'll never get it in a way that you will if you're focused on the number and focused on the person behind the number. And so it's both can be true.
Hmm. And I also just feel like there should just be more tracks as an individual contributor. Some people are
Yes.
not meant to be managers. If you hate being a manager, even if you're a great manager, but you hate doing it, like that Steve Jobs quote, like if 20 days in a row you wake up, look in the mirror, and you're not happy with what you're doing, you got to make a change. And
Mhm.
it's just interesting. It's funny because you can be a terrible manager but love being a manager. Also,
Yes.
which is us
Yes,
the people we want to reach out to the most because they're like, yes, you want to manage people, that's a gift. So
it
you
is.
need to make you good at that.
Mhm.
So what about what is one thing every generation wants from a manager, regardless of age, do you think?
I think trust. I think respect. I think feeling heard. Across the board, everybody wants to feel heard. They want to feel like their experience is valid, like what they're doing matters, like they can have a conversation with somebody without fear. So that psychological safety component where, we can have a dialogue and I'm not going to get in trouble just because I'm having a conversation about something. But I think, at the core, it's feeling heard. That tends to be the one thread that I hear throughout all people in an organization.
Gosh, it's so true. I just think about relationships kind of holistically. There's my business relationships, there's my friendships, there's my the person who I'm in a relationship with.
Mhm.
And thinking back, thankfully not this relationship, but past relationships I've had with significant others where you're yelling, just listen to me. And I remember hearing my parents say that, just listen to me. And I just think that's just that innate need that we want to feel listened to. And that's why active listening is so powerful. And I wish they taught it in school.
Yes.
I was learning the state capital of, during various states when I could have been learning how to echo back to someone's saying. And if
Mhm.
you're and then getting really good at it and actually read into what they're saying even more. Hey, what I know you didn't just I know you just didn't say this exactly, but what I'm hearing is, and then you say it, and people are like, yes, thank you. And as we saw from the book, if you've read it, Gottman's The Seven Horsemen or the what is it, The Secret to Happy Marriage or whatever it's called.
Mhm.
I'm talking about Gottman. Talking about
Yes.
the Four Horsemen, and he talks about active listening. But even if you just do those, that doesn't mean you're going to save your relationship. You need to come to an understanding and have a resolution. You can't just read back what someone says and just magically everything's fine now. But that just shows how far we are. People aren't even doing that. We're not even on the same page. So I think that's so critical. I went on a little bit of a tangent there, but let's move on to a poll. Actually, we have another poll on this same topic around uh, uh, organization. So, what is the biggest challenge managers face in the organization today? So, we covered some of them already. Some of these are new. So, what are you seeing? Is it coaching? Is it how you measure it? I know from talking to HR leaders, we don't have those dashboards yet. It's still, I feel like, still coming where we'll have, leading AI indicator dashboards. And I do believe the future of HR is a profit generating organization where we're optimizing the workplace, not just doing compliance. And that is the future. I think we'll be getting there in the next number of years here. But I'm curious, yeah. So what things are you feeling like? Let's see what the results are. Wow, look at that. Coaching seems to be critical to a lot of people here. Holding people accountable. Yeah. Any thoughts, Kate, on the results?
I'm not surprised. I mean, those are areas that I hear a lot. I think, we tapped into it earlier in our conversation around this sort of fear of holding people accountable. What are your levers? How are you able to actually hold people accountable for their performance without sort of going astray or doing it, in a way that causes more problems than it's worth in some ways. But I think that just coaching and giving feedback, a lot of that comes from leaders not being trained on how to lead. You mentioned it before about having this path of individual contributor versus people manager, which I so strongly agree with. Because what happens is somebody's a good performer. They say, "Oh, you're a top performer." Well, the next logical step is that you lead a group of people, and that should not be necessarily the next logical step. Not everybody is a good leader or should be in a leadership role. And what happens is that most people are not getting this training and development, true skills development before they take on this role. So they're not taught how to coach, how to give feedback appropriately, how to hold people accountable, how to build collaborative teams, the importance of leadership, vulnerability. So these like really core key leadership skills, they're just tossed into this role and they're expected to somehow figure it out. And it's really hard. Leadership and management is the hardest job in an organization, especially that middle management group. And people are dropped into it like they should know how to do it. And that's just not the reality.
I know. And I think that's true again with relationships, personal relationships, all these things, I've had, my business partner and I have done coaching, communication coaching. You shouldn't have to spend $200-300 an hour to be able to learn some of these skills. I know people need to run soon. I do want to share a couple plugs before everyone jumps. We do have live demos of Recognize. We weren't able to do a demo today, but you can come to our demo that happens with a group of people. So you're not just you and a salesperson, okay? It's not going to be awkward or anything like that. It's a lot of fun. There's actually a raffle. Somebody wins a $100 gift card. Jess, who runs that, she's ridiculously generous in that session. So learn more about Recognize. Come and check that out. We also have a poll right now to just tell us how we did. How did Kate and I do? Did you enjoy it? Was it yawn or was it, oh my gosh, thank you? I hope you can tell from our choices that we are real and what we want to see. So yeah, tell us, was it relevant? Was it useful, confusing? Come to that live demo. It's a lot of fun. You'll probably win $100. But that shouldn't be the only reason you come. Don't just come because you want $100. Please come if you want to learn how to create a systematic employee recognition and rewards program. We offer rewards in 150 countries, including live events, tickets, swag, Amazon, and more. Also, we do these webinars almost every week. This one is going to be, I'm taking a break. Oh no, it's going to be on Thursday. So coming up next week. Or is it next week? No, the following week. Yes, great. I do get a week off. I am very busy next week as well, so that's great. But please come in 2 weeks. We're going to be talking about recognition and how it doesn't have to feel like another tab in your browser, another tool. But yeah, great. We had results. We had one person say it was a yawn. I love you. I want to learn more about you. Thanks for being honest. We need that radical candor. I'm glad that nobody thought it was confusing, but most people found it to be, oh my gosh, thankful, relevant, useful. So thanks so much to you all. I just took a screenshot of that to share with the team afterwards. But yeah, thanks so much for coming. I hope to see you in 2 weeks. Connect with Kate as well. I'll go back to the slide there. That's her email address. That's her QR code. We are just so honored to have her on the call. So please connect with her. Check out her website. Take a screenshot if you don't have time to scan the QR code or write down what you're seeing. We're also going to be sending the slides afterwards to people if you were on the call. We'd love to connect with you in the future. And thank you so much for coming, everybody. I hope you found it to be useful and it seemed like you did from the survey. But if you want to connect in the future, Kate, anything you want to say as we close up?
No, I really appreciate you having me and the people that decided to join. It's been a wonderful conversation and look forward to the next one that you have.